The gunshot echoed across the prairie, startling Darla Zimmerman from her restless sleep. She jolted upright in her wagon, heart racing, straining to hear anything beyond the whistling wind. The year was 1875, and traveling alone from Kansas City to Laramie, Wyoming Territory had seemed like her only option after her father's passing. Now, in the dead of night, that decision felt foolish. Clutching her father's old revolver, Darla slipped from beneath her blankets and peered into the darkness. The moon hung full and bright, illuminating the tall grass swaying in the breeze. But something was wrong. The horses, her two sturdy Appaloosas that had pulled her wagon faithfully for hundreds of miles, were gone. "No, no, no," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. Her breath clouded in the cool spring air as she scrambled down from the wagon, her boots sinking into the soft earth. The hitching post where she'd secured them stood empty, the rope sliced clean through. Another gunshot cracked through the night, closer this time. Darla ducked instinctively, scanning the horizon. A rider appeared silhouetted against the moonlit sky, then another. Horse thieves. They had to be the ones who'd taken her animals, and now they were coming back for more. She raised her father's revolver with trembling hands, knowing she had 6 bullets and little experience. The odds weren't good. "Miss, stay down," a deep voice commanded from behind her. Before she could turn, a man on horseback thundered past, rifle raised. He fired once, twice, and the approaching riders scattered like startled birds, disappearing into the darkness. The stranger circled back, his stallion breathing hard. In the moonlight, Darla could make out a tall figure with broad shoulders, the brim of his hat pulled low. "Are you hurt?" he asked, dismounting with fluid grace. "No, but they've stolen my horses," she replied, lowering her weapon. "I'm stranded." He approached slowly, hands visible. "Name's Zeke Jameson. Those were the McCready brothers. They've been stealing horses up and down this territory for months." "Darla Zimmerman," she offered, studying his face as he drew nearer. He wasn't much older than her 22 years, perhaps 26 or 27, with a strong jaw darkened by stubble and eyes that seemed to reflect the starlight. "You're a long way from anywhere, Miss Zimmerman," he said, looking at her wagon. "Where are you headed, Laramie?" "My aunt lives there." Darla tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was. "My father passed recently, and I sold our farm in Missouri. I have nothing left there." Zeke nodded, his expression softening. "I'm sorry for your loss." He walked to the severed ropes, examining them. "They planned this, probably been following you a spell." A chill ran down Darla's spine that had nothing to do with the night air. "What will I do now?" she asked, hating how helpless she sounded. Zeke looked at the wagon, then back at the direction the thieves had fled. "We're about 2 days from Laramie, maybe less." He paused, seeming to wrestle with a decision. "Those McCreadys will be long gone with your horses by now." Darla felt tears threatening to spill. Everything she owned was in that wagon: her father's pocket watch, her mother's wedding dress, the family Bible with generations of names recorded inside. All her hopes for starting anew. As if sensing her despair, Zeke stepped closer. "My horse can't pull that wagon alone," he said thoughtfully. "So I'm truly stranded," Darla concluded, her voice breaking. In the silver light of the moon, Zeke's expression hardened with determination. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "The wagon lost its horses in the night," he said simply, then squared his shoulders. "Then I'll pull it myself." Darla stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "You can't be serious." "As a rattlesnake's bite," he replied, already moving toward the wagon's shaft. "We'll harness my horse to one side and I'll take the other. Come morning, we'll make for Laramie. There's a trading post about 10 miles east where we can perhaps find you proper horses. But why would you help me? You don't know me." Zeke paused, looking over his shoulder. "My pa raised me to believe a man's measured by what he does when no one's watching." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I'm headed to Laramie myself. Was tracking those thieves when I heard the shots." As the night deepened around them, Darla helped Zeke prepare for morning. They secured his belongings to her wagon and rearranged her load to make it lighter. His horse, a muscular black stallion named Thunder, seemed to regard the unusual arrangement with skepticism. "Get some rest," Zeke advised as they finished. "I'll keep watch until dawn." "Thank you," Darla said softly. "I don't know how to repay you." He tipped his hat. "Just doing what's right, Miss Zimmerman." As she climbed back into her wagon, Darla couldn't help but wonder at the strange turn her journey had taken. The night that had nearly robbed her of everything had also delivered an unexpected guardian. She listened to Zeke's quiet movements as he settled against a nearby tree, rifle across his lap. For the first time since leaving Missouri, she didn't feel quite so alone. Dawn broke with streaks of orange and pink painting the eastern sky. Darla awoke to the smell of coffee brewing over a small fire. She quickly dressed and emerged to find Zeke already preparing their unusual caravan. "Hope you don't mind," he said, gesturing to the pot on the fire. "Found your coffee stores and thought we could use the fortification." "Not at all," she replied, accepting the tin cup he offered. The brew was strong and bitter, exactly how her father had made it. The familiar taste brought a lump to her throat. "My horse will take most of the weight," Zeke explained, showing her the harness he'd fashioned from rope and leather. "But with me pulling on the other side, we should make decent progress." Darla frowned, looking at the heavy wagon. "This seems impossible." "Nothing's impossible with enough determination," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "My grandfather pulled a plow by himself for an entire season when his mule died. Stubborn old man refused to quit." "Is that where you get it from?" she asked, unable to suppress a smile. "Ma says I was born mule-headed," he admitted with a chuckle. They ate a quick breakfast of hardtack and jerky before breaking camp. Zeke harnessed Thunder to one side of the wagon shaft, then positioned himself on the other side, wrapping a leather strap across his chest. "Ready," he called. Darla nodded, taking her place at the reins. She would guide Thunder while Zeke pulled. It was madness, but she saw no alternative. With a grunt, Zeke leaned into the harness. Thunder snorted and strained forward. For a terrifying moment, the wagon didn't budge. Then, with a creak of protest, the wheels began to turn. "We're moving," Darla exclaimed. Zeke didn't waste breath responding, his face set in concentration as he matched Thunder's pace. Sweat quickly beaded on his brow despite the cool morning air. The first mile passed in determined silence. By the second, Zeke had settled into a rhythm, his breathing controlled but labored. Darla marveled at his strength. Most men would have given up already or never attempted such a feat in the first place. "Tell me about Laramie," she said, hoping conversation might distract him from the strain. "Growing fast," he managed between breaths. "Railway came through 2 years back, brought all sorts, settlers, merchants, troublemakers too." "And what brings you there?" Zeke paused to wipe his brow. "Was a scout for the army, discharged last year, thought I'd try ranching." He adjusted the harness across his shoulder. "My uncle left me some land, outside town." They continued this way for hours, stopping only briefly to rest and water Thunder. By midday, Zeke's shirt was soaked with sweat, his face reddened from exertion. Yet he refused Darla's suggestion to rest longer. "Need to make that trading post. Before nightfall," he insisted. The sun beat down mercilessly as they pressed on. The landscape rolled by in waves of grass and scattered cottonwoods. Occasionally, they would spot antelope in the distance or hawks circling overhead. As the afternoon waned, Zeke stumbled. Darla immediately pulled up on the reins. "We're stopping," she declared, climbing down from the wagon. "I'm fine," he protested weakly, but his legs trembled with fatigue. "You're not, and I won't watch you collapse." She helped him to a patch of shade beneath a lone oak tree. "Rest, please." He sank to the ground with a groan, leaning back against the trunk. "Just for a moment," he conceded. Darla retrieved her canteen and knelt beside him. "Drink," she ordered, pressing it into his hands. As he drank deeply, she studied him. His determination both impressed and puzzled her. Most men she'd known would have abandoned her to her fate or demanded payment for their help. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked softly. Zeke lowered the canteen, his gaze meeting hers. "Told you, it's the right thing." "There's more," she pressed. "No one pulls a wagon by hand just because it's right." He was quiet for a moment, looking out over the prairie. 2 years ago, my sister was traveling alone from Denver. Her stagecoach was attacked, driver killed, horses stolen. His jaw tightened. She walked 3 days before collapsing. A trapper found her, but he shook his head. Too late. Darla's hand moved instinctively to cover his. "I'm so sorry. When I saw you standing there with those thieves circling." He looked down at their hands. Couldn't ride away, just couldn't. The weight of his confession hung between them. Darla felt a surge of gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. "Your sister would be proud," she whispered. A sad smile touched his lips. "Hope so." They rested another half-hour before Zeke insisted on continuing. This time, Darla walked alongside the wagon, lightening the load. Thunder seemed to understand the urgency, pulling steadily without complaint. As the sun began to set, Darla spotted smoke rising in the distance. "Look," she cried, pointing ahead. Zeke lifted his head, squinting. "Trading post," he confirmed, a note of triumph in his tired voice. "Told you we'd make it." The trading post was little more than a cluster of log buildings surrounded by a rough-hewn fence. A weathered sign proclaimed it Wilson's Trading and Supplies. As they approached, a man with a gray beard stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "That's far enough," he called. "State your business." "Looking for shelter and possibly horses," Zeke shouted back, coming to a halt. The man's eyes widened as he took in their strange procession, one man and one horse pulling a wagon clearly meant for a team. He lowered his weapon. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered, stepping forward. "Never seen the like. Horse thieves," Darla explained as they drew closer. "Took my team last night. McCready Brothers," the trader asked knowingly. Zeke nodded, unharnessing himself from the wagon with stiff movements. "They hit the Pearson place last week," the trader said. "Name's Ezekiel Wilson. Most folks call me Old Ez. Zeke Jameson." Zeke introduced himself, then gestured to Darla. "Miss Darla Zimmerman." Old Ez swept his gaze over Zeke's exhausted form and Thunder's heaving flanks. "You pulled this wagon 10 miles, with just you and one horse." "Had to," Zeke said simply. The old trader shook his head in amazement. "Well, come on in. Got stew on and whiskey for the pain you'll be feeling come morning." Inside the trading post, warmth from a crackling fire enveloped them. The main room served as store, dining area, and gathering place. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with everything from ammunition to bolts of cloth. 2 men sat at a table playing cards, and a woman stirred a large pot hanging over the fire. "Martha," Old Ez called to the woman, "got hungry travelers here, and a man who's earned 3 bowls at least." Martha, a stout woman with kind eyes, looked up and immediately assessed the situation. "Sit," she commanded, pointing to a table. "You look ready to drop, young man." Zeke didn't argue. He sank onto a bench while Darla sat opposite him. "I'll see to your horse," Old Ez offered. Got a good stable out back." While the trader took Thunder outside, Martha brought them bowls of fragrant stew and thick slices of bread. The smell alone made Darla's mouth water. They hadn't eaten since breakfast. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted," Darla declared after the first bite. "Venison," Martha explained. "My Ezekiel got a buck 2 days ago." Zeke ate mechanically, fatigue evident in his every movement. When Martha placed a glass of whiskey before him, he nodded gratefully. "About horses," Darla began once they'd satisfied their initial hunger. "Do you know where we might purchase a team?" Martha exchanged glances with her husband, who had returned and settled at the bar. "Might be difficult," Old Ez said slowly. "Horse trading's been disrupted with all these thefts. Got a mule I could sell you, but that's all at present." Darla's heart sank. "One mule won't be enough." "Could try the Callahan Ranch," Martha suggested. "About a day's ride west. They might spare horses for the right price. Or you could wait," Old Ez added. "Army patrol comes through every couple weeks. They sometimes have extra mounts." Zeke cleared his throat. "How long till they're due?" 8, maybe 10 days, Darla shook her head. "I can't wait that long. My aunt is expecting me." "Callahan's it is, then," Zeke decided. He turned to Old Ez. "We'll take the mule. Between it, my horse, and your directions, we should manage." After supper, Martha showed Darla to a small room off the main building. "It's not much," she apologized, "but it's clean and private." "It's perfect," Darla assured her. After nights in the wagon, a real bed seemed like luxury. "Your husband's quite something," Martha remarked, setting down a basin of water for washing. Darla felt her cheeks warm. "Oh, we're not married. Mr. Jameson is just helping me reach Laramie." Martha raised an eyebrow but didn't comment further. "Well, he's a good man, married or not. Not many would do what he did today." After Martha left, Darla sat on the edge of the bed, contemplating the strange twist of fate that had brought Zeke Jameson into her life. She wondered where he was sleeping, and if his muscles ached as badly as she imagined they must. A soft knock at her door startled her. Opening it a crack, she found Zeke standing there looking uncomfortable. "Sorry to disturb you," he said quietly. "Just wanted to check that you're settled." "I am, thank you." She opened the door wider. "And you, got a spot in the barn?" "Comfortable enough." Darla frowned. "The barn, but surely there are other rooms." "It's fine," he assured her. "Prefer to be near Thunder anyway." She noticed he was holding himself stiffly, his shoulders rigid. "You're in pain," she observed. A rueful smile crossed his face. "Nothing a night's rest won't cure." He started to turn away, then hesitated. "Bought that mule from Old Ez. We'll head out at first light if that suits you." "Whatever you think best," she replied. "Zeke," she caught herself, uncertain what she wanted to say. "Thank you" seemed insufficient for all he'd done. "Yes." He looked back, his expression softening in the dim light. "I'm glad it was you who heard those gunshots last night." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or something deeper. "Get some rest, Miss Zimmerman. Tomorrow will be another long day." As she closed the door, Darla wondered at the strange feeling settling in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something warmer, more unsettling. Lying in bed, she found herself thinking of Zeke's determined expression as he'd pulled the wagon, the gentle way he'd spoken of his sister, the pride he took in doing what he believed right. For the first time since her father's death, Darla felt truly safe. Morning came with the smell of bacon and coffee. Darla dressed quickly, eager to begin the day's journey. In the main room, she found Martha serving breakfast to several travelers who must have arrived during the night. "Your friend's outside," Martha informed her, sliding a plate of eggs and bacon across the counter. "Been up since before dawn, that one." Outside, Darla found Zeke adjusting the new harness arrangement. The mule, a sturdy brown animal with an impressively stubborn expression, was being hitched alongside Thunder. Both animals would pull the wagon together. "Morning," Zeke called, straightening as she approached. He looked better rested, though she noticed he moved with careful deliberation. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Like I pulled a wagon 10 miles, he admitted with a wry smile. "But I'll manage." Old Ez emerged from the barn carrying a burlap sack. "Provisions," he explained, handing it to Darla. "Martha insisted, said young folks need proper feeding." "That's incredibly kind," Darla said. "Please thank her for us." While they finished preparing, Old Ez drew a crude map showing the way to the Callahan Ranch. "Keep the North Star on your right tonight and you'll hit their property by midday tomorrow," he advised. "Good people, fair traders." With final thanks and goodbyes, they set off just as the sun cleared the eastern horizon. The wagon moved much easier with 2 animals pulling, and Zeke rode alongside on a borrowed mare. "Old Ez is letting me use her until we reach the Callahans," he explained. "Said I'd earned a rest from pulling duty." The day passed pleasantly as they traveled westward. The land began to change, the flat prairie giving way to gently rolling hills dotted with pine and aspen groves. In the distance, the faint outline of mountains appeared. "The Laramie Range," Zeke identified them. "Once we're past the Callahan place, we'll start heading northwest through those foothills." Darla found herself enjoying his company more than she'd anticipated. Zeke was knowledgeable about the land, pointing out plants and animal signs she would have missed. He told stories about his time as a scout that made her laugh despite their often dangerous nature. "How did you come to work for the Army?" she asked as they stopped to water the animals at a small creek. Zeke shrugged, watching Thunder drink deeply. "Was either that or mining. Had a way with tracking and the Army paid better." He skipped a stone across the water's surface. "Spent 4 years showing soldiers how not to get lost or ambushed." "Did you see much fighting?" A shadow crossed his face. "Enough. Too much, really." He straightened, changing the subject. "What about you? What takes you to Laramie besides your aunt?" Darla sat on a sun-warmed rock, tucking her skirts around her legs. "A fresh start. After Pa died, there wasn't much holding me in Missouri. Ma's been gone 10 years now, and the farm never really prospered." She traced patterns in the dirt with a stick. "Aunt Vivian wrote that Laramie's growing, that a young woman with some education might find opportunities there." "You're educated?" Zeke asked, seeming genuinely interested. 8 years of schooling and 2 teaching under Miss Hargrove, the strictest schoolmistress in Jackson County, Darla replied with a small smile. "Pa insisted. Said a woman needs her own means, especially if she's as stubborn as I am." Zeke chuckled. "He sounds like a wise man." "He was," Darla said softly. "Would have liked you, I think." Something passed between them then, a moment of understanding that needed no words. Zeke held her gaze a beat longer than necessary before looking away. "We should keep moving," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "Want to make good distance before nightfall." As they continued their journey, Darla found herself watching Zeke when he wasn't looking the confident way he sat a horse, the thoughtful expression that crossed his face when he surveyed the land ahead, the gentleness in his hands when he tended to Thunder. By late afternoon, dark clouds began gathering in the west. The air grew heavy with the promise of rain. "We should find shelter," Zeke advised, eyeing the approaching storm. "Looks to be a downpour coming." They had just crested a hill when Darla spotted what appeared to be an abandoned homestead in the valley below a small cabin with a partially collapsed roof, a well, and the remains of what might have been a corral. "There," she pointed. "Could we shelter there?" Zeke nodded, already turning Thunder toward the structure. "Good eye." They reached the cabin just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. The building was indeed abandoned, its door hanging from one hinge, windows long since shattered. But most of the roof remained intact, and the stone chimney looked solid. "Not exactly the Palmer House Hotel," Zeke remarked as they hurried inside, "but it'll keep us dry." While Darla assessed their temporary shelter, Zeke secured the animals in the remains of a lean-to attached to the cabin's side. The rain was falling steadily now, drumming against the roof. Inside, the cabin consisted of one room with a stone fireplace, a broken table, and the frame of what had once been a bed. Dust and leaves covered the floor, and a family of mice scurried away at their entrance. "Wonder what happened to the folks who lived here," Darla mused, brushing cobwebs from a corner. "Hard to say." Zeke examined the fireplace, testing the chimney for blockages. Might have been illness, might have been Indians, might have just been the land itself. "Takes a certain kind of stubbornness to make it out here. Like pulling a wagon by hand," Darla suggested with a smile. Zeke laughed, the sound warming the dreary space. "Exactly like that." He managed to get a fire started with wood salvaged from broken furniture and fallen branches near the cabin. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls as rain pounded harder outside, occasionally blown through the broken windows. They shared a meal of Martha's provisions: cold chicken, corn bread, and dried apples sitting cross-legged before the fire. Outside, thunder rolled across the prairie. "Reminds me of nights on the trail," Zeke remarked, leaning back against the wall. "Always did like a good storm, provided I had shelter." "I used to hide under my blankets," Darla admitted. "Ma would tell me it was just the angels rearranging furniture in heaven." "That's a nice thought," Zeke said softly. "Better than my pa's explanation that it was God bowling." Darla laughed, trying to imagine the Almighty engaged in such an earthly pastime. "Did your father have many such theories?" "Oh, plenty." Zeke's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled at the memory. "Said shooting stars were angels striking matches, and the northern lights were the souls of great warriors dancing in the sky. He sounds wonderful." "He was." Zeke poked at the fire with a stick. "Raised me and my sister alone after Ma died birthing my brother. Baby didn't make it either." "I'm sorry," Darla said, understanding the loss all too well. "Long time ago now," Zeke replied. "Pa did his best, taught me everything I know about survival, tracking, treating man and beast fairly." He paused, his expression growing distant. "Died while I was with the army. Influenza." Darla moved closer, drawn by the shared experience of grief. "It's strange, isn't it? How life continues without them. Sometimes I wake up forgetting Pa's gone, and then it hits me all over again." Zeke nodded, meeting her gaze. "Gets easier, but never really goes away." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the storm rage outside. The fire crackled and popped, casting Zeke's features into sharp relief: the strong line of his jaw, the small scar above his right eyebrow, the way his eyes reflected the dancing flames. "Tell me about your aunt in Laramie," he eventually said. "Aunt Vivian is my father's sister, never married, runs a boarding house for respectable ladies." Darla smiled at the thought of her formidable aunt. "She's proper as they come, but has a heart bigger than the Mississippi. Writes the most wonderful letters full of town gossip and advice I never asked for. And she's expecting you." "Yes, though I'm later than planned. The journey took longer than I anticipated, even before losing the horses." Darla sighed, thinking of the challenges they still faced. "She's offered me a place to stay until I find my footing. Perhaps I can teach or work in one of the new shops." "Laramie's growing fast," Zeke agreed. "Good people there, mostly. Town's trying to shed its rough beginnings." Thunder cracked directly overhead, making Darla jump. Without thinking, she reached for Zeke's hand. He squeezed it reassuringly. Just the angels rearranging furniture, he reminded her with a gentle smile. Their hands remained joined, neither seeming eager to pull away. Darla became acutely aware of the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers, the warmth that seemed to flow from his touch into her very bones. When he finally released her hand, she felt its absence keenly. "Should get some rest," he suggested, his voice huskier than before. "I'll keep the fire going." Darla nodded, suddenly shy. She arranged her blankets on the cleanest part of the floor, near enough to the fire for warmth but with a respectful distance between her and Zeke. As she drifted toward sleep, lulled by the rhythmic sound of rain and the occasional crackle of the fire, she heard Zeke humming softly an old trail song her father used to sing. The familiar melody followed her into dreams. Morning arrived with clear skies and birdsong. Darla awoke to find Zeke already outside, checking on the animals. The air smelled fresh and clean after the storm, the world washed anew. "Creek's running high," Zeke reported when he returned. "We'll need to find a safe crossing." They ate a quick breakfast and packed up their meager camp. As they prepared to leave, Darla paused in the doorway of the old cabin, looking back at the empty room that had sheltered them through the storm. "Hope they found happiness elsewhere," she said quietly, "whoever they were." Zeke stood beside her, following her gaze. "Some dreams don't take root where we plant them. Doesn't mean they won't flower somewhere else." The unexpected poetry of his words surprised her. This man continued to reveal depths she hadn't anticipated when she first met him. They traveled steadily through the morning, fording the swollen creek at a shallow point Zeke discovered. The wagon wheels sank deep into the mud on the far bank, but with thunder and the mules straining in their harnesses, they pulled through. By midday, they spotted smoke rising from a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley ahead the Callahan ranch. As they drew closer, Darla could make out a substantial log house, several outbuildings, a corral filled with horses, and fields where cattle grazed. "Bigger operation than I expected," Zeke remarked, sounding impressed. A rider appeared on the ridge above them, watching their approach. After a moment, he turned his horse and galloped toward the ranch buildings, presumably to announce their arrival. By the time they reached the main house, a welcoming committee had formed: a broad-shouldered man with a silver-streaked beard, a woman in a practical calico dress, and several ranch hands hovering nearby. "Visitors," the bearded man called out as they drew near. "Don't get many this time of year." "Patrick Callahan at your service." He extended a weather-roughened hand first to Zeke, then to Darla. "Zeke Jameson," Zeke introduced himself. "And this is Miss Darla Zimmerman. We're traveling to Laramie." "Eleanor Callahan," the woman said warmly. "You both look in need of a good meal. Come inside while the boys see to your animals." Inside the ranch house, Darla was struck by the unexpected touches of refinement: shelves of books, a piano in the corner, curtains at the windows, and a polished dining table large enough to seat 12. A young woman about Darla's age was setting plates on the table. "Our daughter, Margaret," Mrs. Callahan introduced her. "Maggie, these folks are traveling to Laramie." After washing up, they sat down to a hearty midday meal of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh baked bread. Darla hadn't realized how tired she was of trail food until she tasted Mrs. Callahan's cooking. "What brings you to these parts?" Mr. Callahan asked as they ate. Zeke explained their situation: the horse theft, the trading post, and their need for a proper team to pull Darla's wagon. Mr. Callahan's expression darkened at the mention of the McCready brothers. "Those scoundrels have been a plague on honest folk for too long. Sheriff in Laramie's offering a reward now." "We heard you might have horses for sale," Darla said hopefully. The rancher nodded, buttering a piece of bread. "Might do. Got some good stock this spring. Not cheap, mind you, but sound animals. I can pay a fair price, Darla assured him. The money from the sale of her father's farm was sewn into the lining of her dress, not all of it, but enough for emergencies like this. After the meal, Mr. Callahan led them to the corral where several dozen horses milled about. He whistled, and two matching bay geldings trotted over. "These two are brothers," he explained. 4 years old, well broke to harness and good-natured, been working as a team since they were yearlings. Zeke examined the horses with a critical eye, checking their teeth, hooves, and legs. "They're fine animals," he concluded. The price Mr. Callahan named was high but fair. Darla counted out the bills, feeling a pang as her emergency fund diminished significantly. "We'll help you harness them up," Mr. Callahan offered, "but you're welcome to stay the night, getting late to start traveling again." Darla looked to Zeke, who nodded his agreement. "That's very kind of you," she said. That evening, after a supper even more substantial than lunch, they gathered in the main room. Margaret played the piano while her mother mended clothing. Mr. Callahan and Zeke discussed routes to Laramie and the condition of the trails after the storm. Darla found herself drawn into conversation with Mrs. Callahan, who had lived in the territory for 20 years. "It was just Patrick and me at first," the older woman reminisced. "No neighbors for 30 miles. We lived in a soddy until he could cut logs for this house." "You must be very brave," Darla said admiringly. Mrs. Callahan shook her head. "Just stubborn and in love. That gets you through a lot of hard times." She glanced meaningfully toward Zeke. "Your husband seems a good man." For the second time, Darla found herself hastily explaining that Zeke wasn't her husband. "He's just helping me reach Laramie safely." Mrs. Callahan's knowing smile suggested she wasn't convinced. "Well, a man who'd pull a wagon by hand to help a woman in distress is worth keeping an eye on, married or not." Darla felt her cheeks warm and changed the subject. Later, as the household prepared for bed, Mrs. Callahan showed Darla to a small guest room. "Margaret laid out a nightdress for you," she said, "and there's water in the pitcher if you'd like to wash." "Thank you for your hospitality," Darla said sincerely. "It's been so long since I've slept in a proper bed 2 nights running." The older woman patted her hand. "You remind me of myself at your age, determined to make your own way. Just remember, there's no shame in accepting help when it's offered from the right hands." After Mrs. Callahan left, Darla stood at the window, looking out at the starlit landscape. She could see the bunkhouse where Zeke would be sleeping with the ranch hands, a lantern still glowing in its window. These past days with him had awakened feelings she hadn't experienced before, not just gratitude or friendship, but something deeper, more unsettling. She found herself cataloging small details about him. The way the corner of his mouth lifted slightly when he was amused but trying not to show it. How he always checked thunder before seeing to his own comfort. The surprising gentleness in his hands despite their strength. Darla turned from the window, chiding herself for such thoughts. Whatever connection they shared was temporary, born of unusual circumstances. Once they reached Laramie, they would go their separate ways, she to her aunt's boarding house, he to his uncle's ranch. That was the natural order of things. Yet as she slipped beneath the clean sheets, Darla couldn't help wondering what it might be like if their paths continued to cross. They departed the Callahan ranch early the next morning, the wagon now properly hitched to its new team. The bay geldings proved to be as good-natured and strong as promised, moving at a steady pace that would see them reach Laramie by the following afternoon. "You've got good horses there," Zeke commented as they traveled. Callahan didn't exaggerate their quality. "They cost nearly half what I have left," Darla admitted, "but I couldn't stay stranded." Zeke frowned slightly at this revelation. "You should have said something. I could have helped with the cost." You've done enough, she insisted. More than enough. The terrain grew more challenging as they approached the foothills of the Laramie Range. The trail wound through stands of pine and aspen, occasionally offering breathtaking views of the plains they'd left behind. Around midday, they stopped in a small meadow to rest the horses and eat. Sitting on a fallen log, sharing the last of Martha's provisions, Darla found herself wondering how many more such moments they would share. "What will you do once you reach your uncle's ranch?" she asked. Zeke considered the question, absently breaking a twig into smaller pieces. "Build a cabin first, then start small few cattle, maybe some horses." He looked up, his eyes reflecting the clear blue of the sky. "Always wanted a place of my own, something to build, something to leave behind someday." "It sounds wonderful," Darla said honestly. "What about you? Will you stay with your aunt long?" "Just until I find my feet. I'd like to teach if possible." She brushed crumbs from her skirt, "or perhaps work in a shop. Aunt Vivian mentioned a new dressmaker in town looking for help." "You'll do well," Zeke said with quiet confidence. "Got a determination about you." "High praise from a man who pulled a wagon 10 miles, she teased. His laughter echoed through the meadow, startling a rabbit from the underbrush. The sound warmed something inside her that had been cold for too long. As they continued their journey, the conversation flowed easily between them. Zeke told stories of his scouting days, of leading army patrols through dangerous territory, and learning the ways of the land from native guides. Darla shared memories of teaching in the one-room schoolhouse back home, of difficult students won over and small triumphs celebrated. By late afternoon, they reached a spot Zeke declared perfect for camping, a clearing near a small stream, sheltered by tall pines. "Last night on the trail," he remarked as they made camp. "This time tomorrow you'll be at your aunt's place." Darla nodded, feeling strangely melancholy at the thought. "And you'll be heading to your uncle's land." "It's not far from town," Zeke said, busying himself with the fire. "Maybe 10 miles north. Will you come into Laramie often?" The question slipped out before she could consider its implications. Zeke looked up, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. "Expect I'll need supplies now and then." They ate a simple supper as darkness fell, the fire casting a warm glow over their small camp. Overhead, stars appeared one by one, brilliant against the deepening blue of the sky. "Beautiful night," Darla observed, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the growing chill. "Always loved the stars out here," Zeke agreed. "In the army camps, with all the fires and lanterns, you couldn't see them properly. But out on patrol, miles from anywhere." He gestured upward, "like diamonds scattered across black velvet." "You have a poet's heart for a cowboy," Darla observed softly. Zeke ducked his head, embarrassed. "Don't tell anyone. Ruin my reputation." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the crackling fire and the gentle murmur of the stream. Tomorrow would bring the end of their journey together, and Darla found herself wanting to preserve these moments, to commit them to memory. "Thank you," she said finally. "Not just for helping me reach Laramie, but for—" She hesitated, searching for the right words. "For making me feel safe when everything seemed lost." Zeke met her gaze across the fire, his expression serious. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Darla. Would have found a way even without me." It was the first time he'd used her given name without the formal Miss preceding it. The intimacy of it sent a small thrill through her. "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but I'm glad I didn't have to." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight parting of lips as if he might say more. But instead he stood abruptly. "Should check on the horses before turning in," he said, his voice rougher than usual. As he walked away, Darla stared into the flames, wondering if she'd imagined the moment of connection between them. Perhaps it was merely wishful thinking on her part, born of gratitude and the intensity of their shared journey. Yet when Zeke returned, she noticed he sat closer to her than before, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. They spoke of practical matters, the route they would take in the morning, their estimated time of arrival in Laramie, what she might expect of the town. When at last they prepared for sleep, Darla in her wagon and Zeke in his bedroll nearby, she found herself reluctant to say good night. "Sleep well, Zeke," she called softly from the wagon's opening. "You too, Darla," he replied, his voice carrying clearly through the still night air. "Dream of good things." Morning brought a flurry of activity as they broke camp for the last time. Both seemed intent on practical tasks, perhaps to avoid acknowledging the impending conclusion of their journey. They spoke little as they traveled, each lost in private thoughts. The landscape grew more settled as they approached Laramie. Occasional homesteads appeared, then more frequently. By early afternoon, they could see smoke rising from the town in the distance. "There it is," Zeke said, pointing. "Laramie." Darla felt a complex mix of emotions: excitement at reaching her destination, apprehension about the unknown future awaiting her, and a deep sadness at the thought of parting from Zeke. As they drew closer to town, the trail widened into a proper road. They began to pass other travelers, farmers with wagons of produce, riders on horseback, a stagecoach bouncing along at a brisk pace. Laramie itself proved larger than Darla had imagined: several streets of wooden buildings, some quite substantial, with signs advertising various businesses. The railroad station dominated one end of town, while church spires rose at the other. "Your aunt's boarding house," Zeke prompted. "2nd Street, near the Methodist Church," Darla recalled from her aunt's letters. A white house with blue shutters and a sign reading "Zimmerman Ladies Boarding." They found it easily enough: a 2-story structure with a neat garden and a wide front porch. As they pulled up before it, the front door opened, and a tall, angular woman in a severe black dress emerged. "Darla," she called, hurrying down the steps. "My word, we've been so worried." "Your letter said you'd arrive a week ago, Aunt Vivian," Darla greeted her, accepting the older woman's embrace as Zeke helped her down from the wagon. "I'm sorry to have worried you. We had some trouble on the trail." "We?" Her aunt's sharp eyes moved to Zeke, who stood respectfully beside the wagon, hat in hand. "Zeke Jameson, madam," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "Had the honor of assisting Miss Zimmerman for the final leg of her journey." Darla quickly explained their meeting and the circumstances that had thrown them together, though she omitted certain details like Zeke pulling the wagon by hand that might seem improper to her aunt's sensibilities. "Well, Mr. Jameson, it seems we owe you a debt of gratitude," Aunt Vivian declared, though her expression remained somewhat suspicious. "Would you join us for tea? It's the least we can offer." Zeke glanced at Darla, then back to her aunt. "That's kind of you, madam, but I should see about stabling these horses for Miss Zimmerman and then be on my way. Got business to attend to." Darla felt a pang of disappointment, but understood his reluctance. Her aunt's boarding house, with its ladies-only sign prominently displayed, was hardly a comfortable place for a trail-worn cowboy. "At least let me pay you for your trouble," Aunt Vivian insisted, reaching for her reticule. "That won't be necessary," Zeke said firmly. "Was no trouble at all." An awkward silence fell. Darla knew this was the moment to say goodbye, yet found herself unable to form the words. "Perhaps Mr. Jameson could join us for Sunday dinner," she suggested impulsively. "After he's settled his business." Aunt Vivian raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Certainly. Sunday at 1 o'clock, Mr. Jameson, if you're so inclined." Zeke looked momentarily surprised, then touched the brim of his hat. "Would be an honor, madam." Two of the boarders emerged to help with Darla's trunks and boxes, creating a flurry of activity that prevented any private farewell. Before she quite realized it, Zeke was mounting Thunder, preparing to lead the wagon to the livery stable. "Sunday, then," Darla said, looking up at him. "Sunday," he confirmed, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Then, with a nod to Aunt Vivian, he clicked to the horses and rode away, the wagon following behind. Darla watched until he turned the corner and disappeared from sight. "Come inside, dear," Aunt Vivian urged, taking her arm. "You must be exhausted, and I want to hear everything about your journey." The boarding house was precisely as Darla had imagined from her aunt's letters, immaculately clean, modestly furnished, and run with military precision. She was introduced to the other boarders, two schoolteachers, a widow who worked at the mercantile, and a young woman employed by the telegraph office. Her room, though small, was pleasant, with a window overlooking the garden and simple but comfortable furnishings. After weeks on the trail, it seemed luxurious. Yet as she unpacked her belongings and prepared for her first night in Laramie, Darla found her thoughts repeatedly returning to Zeke. She wondered where he was at that moment, whether he'd reached his uncle's property, if he was thinking of her as she was thinking of him. "Foolishness," she muttered to herself, smoothing the bedspread with unnecessary force. Their paths had crossed by chance, nothing more. The connection she felt was likely one-sided, born of extraordinary circumstances. Yet Sunday's dinner invitation hung in the air like a promise, and Darla found herself counting the days until then. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Aunt Vivian proved determined to introduce her niece to Laramie society as quickly as possible. They visited the mercantile, the dressmaker's shop, where Darla did indeed secure part-time employment, and the school board chairman, who expressed interest in her teaching experience but had no immediate openings. On Saturday, her aunt insisted they attend a social at the church, where Darla was introduced to so many people she had no hope of remembering all their names. Among them was the young minister, Reverend Thomas Bartlett, who seemed particularly pleased to make her acquaintance. "Your aunt speaks very highly of you, Miss Zimmerman," he said, lingering after most introductions had moved on. "I understand you have experience teaching." "Yes, 2 years in Missouri," Darla confirmed. "Wonderful. Our Sunday school is in desperate need of qualified teachers." His earnest face lit up with enthusiasm. "Perhaps you might consider volunteering." Before Darla could respond, Aunt Vivian appeared at her side. "Reverend Bartlett, I see you've met my niece. Isn't she just what our little community needs?" The way her aunt looked meaningfully between them made Darla inwardly cringe. Clearly, Aunt Vivian had matchmaking intentions. "Indeed she is," the Reverend agreed, his admiring gaze making Darla uncomfortable. Though pleasant enough, Reverend Bartlett inspired none of the feelings that stirred within her when Zeke merely looked her way. Still, she agreed to visit the Sunday school the following week, if only to escape the awkward conversation. Sunday dawned clear and bright. Darla woke early, feeling a nervous anticipation she hadn't experienced since her first day of teaching. She chose her dress with unusual care, a blue calico that brought out her eyes, neither too plain nor too fancy for a Sunday dinner. Church services passed in a blur, with Darla barely hearing Reverend Bartlett's sermon. Her attention was focused on the door, watching for Zeke's arrival, but he wasn't among the congregants. "Perhaps your cowboy friend forgot," Aunt Vivian remarked as they walked home, her tone suggesting she wouldn't be disappointed if that were the case. "He didn't forget," Darla replied with more confidence than she felt. "He's probably just seeing to his ranch affairs first." At 1:45, there was a knock at the boarding house door. Darla, helping set the table, froze at the sound. One of the other boarders, Miss Pearson, went to answer it. "There's a gentleman caller for Miss Zimmerman," she announced, eyes wide with curiosity. Darla smoothed her skirts and tried to calm her racing heart before entering the parlor. There stood Zeke, almost unrecognizable at first glance. Gone were the trail-worn clothes and dusty boots. In their place, he wore a clean dark suit, a white shirt with a string tie and polished boots. His hair was neatly trimmed, his face freshly shaved. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her, hat in hand. "Hope I'm not too early." "Not at all," she managed, finding her voice. "You look different." A hint of his familiar smile appeared. "Figured your aunt might appreciate if I didn't track half the territory's dust into her home." He'd brought gifts, a jar of honey from a beekeeper outside town for Aunt Vivian, and for Darla, a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much," he said as she unwrapped it, revealing a carved wooden horse, small enough to fit in her palm. "Made it while setting up my camp. Thought you might want a reminder of the journey." The exquisite little carving captured the spirit of a horse in motion, its lines clean and graceful. "It's beautiful," Darla said softly. "Thank you." Dinner proved less awkward than she'd feared. Zeke's natural courtesy impressed even Aunt Vivian, and he conversed easily with the other boarders about everything from the railroad's impact on the territory to the merits of various horse breeds. "And your uncle's ranch, Mr. Jameson?" Aunt Vivian inquired as they finished dessert. "Is it extensive?" "Not as grand as that description makes it sound," Zeke admitted. "My uncle never married, lived simply. Left me 100 acres, a cabin that needs work, and instructions to do something worthwhile with it. Been camping there since Thursday, assessing what needs doing first." "Quite an undertaking for one man," Miss Pearson observed. Zeke nodded. "Planning to hire help once I've got a proper plan. For now, just getting my bearings." After the meal, Aunt Vivian surprised everyone by suggesting a walk through town to aid digestion. More surprising still, she paired Darla with Zeke while she walked ahead with the other ladies. "Your aunt's more cunning than she appears," Zeke murmured as they fell into step behind the others. Darla laughed softly. "Don't be fooled. She's arranging for us to be seen together by the whole town. By tomorrow, everyone will be talking about her niece walking out with the new rancher." "Does that bother you?" His tone was carefully neutral. She considered the question honestly. "No," she finally replied. "Does it bother you?" Instead of answering directly, he said, "I've been thinking about that wagon." "Which wagon?" "Yours, the one that lost its horses." He glanced at her, eyes serious. "Been thinking about the man who said he'd pull it himself." Darla's heart quickened. "What about him?" "He was a fool," Zeke said softly, "but a lucky one. Lucky that wagon belonged to you." They walked in silence for several steps, the implication of his words hanging between them. "I've never met anyone like you," Darla finally said. "Someone who would do what you did for a complete stranger. Wasn't just anyone." His voice dropped lower. "Was you." Before she could respond, they rounded a corner and nearly collided with Reverend Bartlett. "Miss Zimmerman," he exclaimed, recovering quickly. "What a pleasant surprise." Darla made the necessary introductions, noting the way the Reverend's friendly expression cooled slightly when he learned who Zeke was. "Mr. Jameson assisted me when my horses were stolen on the trail," she explained. "How fortunate," Reverend Bartlett replied, his tone suggesting he found it anything but. "Well, I mustn't keep you from your constitutional. Looking forward to showing you the Sunday school next week, Miss Zimmerman." As he walked away, Zeke raised an eyebrow. "Friend of yours?" "Aunt Vivian's, mostly," Darla admitted. "I think she hopes he might take an interest in me." "Has he?" "Perhaps, but the feeling isn't mutual." Something in Zeke's expression relaxed. They continued their walk, eventually catching up with Aunt Vivian and the others at the town square. As the group turned toward home, Zeke excused himself. "Got supplies to collect before the store's close," he explained. "Thank you for the dinner and company, Mrs. Zimmerman." "You're most welcome, Mr. Jameson," Aunt Vivian replied, surprising Darla with her warmth. "Perhaps you'll join us again sometime." "I'd like that," he said, his eyes meeting Darla's. "Good day, ladies." As they walked home, Aunt Vivian linked her arm through Darla's. "Your Mr. Jameson is not what I expected," she admitted. "He's not my Mr. Jameson," Darla protested. "No." Her aunt's skeptical tone said otherwise. "Well, he's certainly more refined than his appearance would suggest. Knows his literature too. Did you hear him discussing Dickens with Miss Evers?" Darla hadn't, being too absorbed in her own conversation with him. "He's full of surprises," she agreed. That evening, alone in her room, Darla placed the carved horse on her bedside table, running her finger along its smooth back. The little figure captured something essential about its creator's strength, combined with unexpected gentleness, practical skill with artistic vision. Over the following weeks, Laramie began to feel like home. Darla settled into a routine, working mornings at the dressmaker's shop and volunteering with the Sunday school in the afternoons. She made friends among the other boarders and became familiar with the town's rhythms and personalities. Zeke came into town every Saturday, and though he didn't always call at the boarding house, Darla frequently encountered him at the mercantile, the post office, occasionally at church. Each meeting left her more certain of her feelings, yet uncertain of his intentions. He was unfailingly polite, often bringing small gifts, wildflowers he'd gathered, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy, once a jar of wild strawberry preserves from a neighbor's wife. They would talk easily about their respective weeks, but always in public, always with the constraints of propriety around them. One Saturday in late June, Darla was arranging fabric in the dressmaker's front window when she spotted Zeke outside the bank across the street. He was deep in conversation with Mr. Holcomb, the banker, both men looking serious. As she watched, they shook hands and Zeke emerged from the bank looking satisfied. On impulse, she stepped outside just as he was mounting thunder. "Mr. Jameson," she called. "Good morning." He turned, his expression brightening at the sight of her. "Miss Zimmerman, looking well today." "Thank you." She moved closer, lowering her voice. "I was wondering if you might escort me to the Independence Day celebration next week. There's to be a picnic and fireworks." Zeke's smile faltered slightly. "Wish I could, but I'll be away. Cattle Drive from Cheyenne agreed to help a neighbor bring in some stock. Won't be back till the 6th or 7th. Darla tried to hide her disappointment. "Of course. Another time, perhaps. Count on it." He hesitated, then added, "Actually, there's something I'd like to show you when I return. Something important." Before she could ask what he meant, Mrs. Fletcher, the dressmaker, called from the shop door. "Darla, dear, the Patterson order needs finishing." "I should go," Darla said reluctantly. Zeke nodded. "When I get back," he promised. Then, surprising her, he reached out and briefly clasped her hand before turning thunder toward the town limits. Darla watched him ride away, wondering what he could possibly want to show her that warranted such a serious expression. The 4th of July celebration was everything a small frontier town could muster: patriotic speeches, children's races, a communal picnic spread across the town square, and modest fireworks as darkness fell. Darla enjoyed herself despite Zeke's absence, particularly when Reverend Bartlett's obvious attentions gave her the perfect excuse to remain with Aunt Vivian and the other boarders, rather than walking out alone with him. July 7th arrived with no sign of Zeke. By the 10th, Darla found herself watching the road north whenever she had a free moment, worrying that something had happened on the cattle drive. On the 12th, just as she was closing the shop, she looked up to see Thunder trotting down the main street, Zeke in the saddle looking trail worn but unharmed. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by the awareness that she had no legitimate reason to approach him in public without invitation. Propriety demanded she wait for him to call at the boarding house. The wait proved short. That evening, just after supper, there was a knock at the door. Aunt Vivian answered it herself, returning to the parlor with Zeke in tow. "Mr. Jameson to see you, Darla," she announced, then discreetly withdrew to give them the appearance of privacy while remaining within sight in the adjoining room. Zeke looked refreshed, having clearly taken time to clean up before calling. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her formally, aware of her aunt's presence nearby. "Hope you've been well." "Very well, thank you," Darla replied, gesturing for him to sit. "And you? The cattle drive was successful." It was, though longer than expected. Bad weather in the pass. He settled in the chair opposite her, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "I was wondering if you might be available tomorrow afternoon for that matter I mentioned before leaving." "I believe I could arrange it," Darla said, curiosity piqued. "What time would suit you?" 2 o'clock. I could bring the wagon." They agreed on the details, maintaining the formal conversation expected under her aunt's watchful eye. When Zeke departed shortly thereafter, Aunt Vivian returned to the parlor with a knowing look. "And what is this outing Mr. Jameson has planned?" she inquired. "I'm not entirely sure," Darla admitted. "He said there's something he wishes to show me." Her aunt pursed her lips. "Well, I suppose it's proper enough if you're back before dark. Mr. Jameson has proven himself a gentleman thus far." The following day dawned clear and warm. Darla chose a practical dress for the outing, unsure what Zeke had planned. At precisely 2 o'clock, he arrived with a wagon, not her old one, but a newer, well-sprung buggy pulled by a handsome matched pair. "This is new," she commented as he helped her up to the seat. "Seemed time for an upgrade," he replied with a smile. "More comfortable for passengers." They drove north out of town, following the river for several miles before turning onto a less traveled track that wound through stands of aspen toward the foothills. "Are we going to your ranch?" Darla asked, realizing the direction. Zeke nodded, looking slightly apprehensive. "If that's agreeable." "Of course," she assured him, though inwardly she wondered at the propriety of visiting a bachelor's home unchaperoned. Still, her curiosity outweighed such concerns. The track eventually opened onto a small valley nestled between rolling hills. A creek meandered through it, bordered by cottonwoods. On a gentle rise overlooking the valley stood a cabin, not the rough shelter she had imagined, but a substantial structure with a wide porch and glass windows. "Your uncle left you this?" she asked, surprised by its size and apparent comfort. "Not exactly," Zeke admitted as they approached. "His cabin was less impressive. This is new." Understanding dawned slowly. "You built this with help," he said modestly. "Hired some men from town, traded labor with neighbors. Been working on it since I arrived." As they drew closer, Darla could see the care that had gone into the construction, the precisely fitted logs, the stone chimney, the neatly shingled roof. A small barn and corral stood nearby, and what appeared to be the beginnings of a garden plot was marked out beside the cabin. Zeke helped her down from the buggy, watching her face as she took in the homestead. "What do you think?" "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "You've accomplished so much in such a short time." "Come see inside," he invited, leading her up the porch steps. The cabin's interior was simple but thoughtfully designed: a large main room with a stone fireplace, a separate kitchen area, and doors leading to what she presumed were bedrooms. The furniture was minimal but well crafted, much of it looking recently made. "Did you build these too?" she asked, running her hand along the smooth surface of a dining table. "Some," he acknowledged. "Traded for others." "It's lovely, Zeke," she said sincerely. "But why did you want to show me this so urgently?" He took a deep breath, removing his hat and holding it almost like a shield. "Because I wanted you to see it before I asked you something important." Darla's heart began to race as he took a step closer. "When I met you that night, when your wagon lost its horses, I thought I was just doing what any decent man would do," he began. "But somewhere between pulling that wagon and reaching Laramie, something changed for me." He set his hat aside and took her hands in his. "I've spent every day since then building this place, thinking about who might share it with me, thinking about you." "Zeke," she whispered, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "I know it's fast," he continued. "Know we've only known each other a short while, but sometimes you just know when something's right." He squeezed her hands gently. "I'm asking if you might consider becoming my wife, Darla. Not right away, we could have a proper courtship first, do things properly, but I wanted you to see the home I'm offering before you decided." Joy bubbled up inside her, so intense she couldn't contain it. "Yes," she said simply. Zeke blinked. "Yes to courtship or yes to—" "Yes to everything," Darla clarified, laughing through sudden tears. "Yes to courtship, yes to marriage, yes to sharing this beautiful home with you." For a moment, he seemed stunned by her ready acceptance. Then his face broke into the most radiant smile she'd ever seen. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I've been falling in love with you since the moment you stood your ground against those thieves," he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. "Should have told you sooner." "I think I knew when you said you'd pull the wagon yourself," Darla admitted. "No one had ever done something so selfless for me." He drew back slightly, his expression growing serious. "There's something else you should know." Taking her hand, he led her to a window overlooking the valley. "See those cattle in the lower pasture? They're the beginning of my herd, and the foundation for our future if you'll have it." "Our future," she repeated, loving the sound of it. "I will have it, Zeke, gladly." His arms encircled her from behind as they gazed out at the land that would be their home. "I used the money from selling my army commission to buy the stock and build this place," he explained. "And I took out a small loan from Mr. Holcomb to finish it properly. It'll mean hard work for some years." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Darla assured him, leaning back against his chest. "My father raised me to value it." Zeke turned her gently to face him. "There's one more thing," he said softly, reaching into his pocket. "Belonged to my mother. Would be honored if you'd wear it." He held out a simple gold band with a small pearl set in its center. "It's perfect," Darla whispered as he slipped it onto her finger. "Just perfect." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, as if each feared the other might vanish like a dream. The second was deeper, a promise of the life they would build together. Aunt Vivian received the news of their engagement with surprising enthusiasm. "I suspected as much," she declared. "No man builds a house that sighs for himself alone." The courtship that followed was brief but proper. Zeke called at the boarding house twice weekly, escorted Darla to church on Sundays, and occasionally took her driving through the countryside. They were rarely alone, as propriety demanded, but the moments they managed to steal a touch of hands, a private smile, a whispered word of affection sustained them through the weeks of waiting. They were married on a bright September morning in the Methodist church, with half the town in attendance. Darla wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered by Mrs. Fletcher to suit the current fashion. Zeke stood tall and proud in a new suit, his expression a mixture of joy and disbelief as she walked toward him on Aunt Vivian's arm. The reverend who performed the ceremony was not Thomas Bartlett, who had developed a sudden interest in missionary work in Nevada, but an older minister from Cheyenne who was a friend of the Callahans. Patrick and Alina had made the journey for the wedding, bringing Margaret and a wagon load of household gifts. As the couple exchanged vows, Darla thought of how far she had come since that night on the prairie, not just in distance, but in heart. The frightened young woman whose wagon had lost its horses had found not only safety but love in the arms of the man who had offered to pull it himself. The wedding breakfast at the hotel was a joyous affair, with toasts and well wishes from their new friends and neighbors. When it came time to leave, Zeke helped Darla into their buggy, now decorated with ribbons and flowers by well-meaning townsfolk. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Jameson?" he asked, his eyes shining with love and promise. "More than ready," she replied, taking his hand. As they drove through town toward the road north, people called out congratulations and waved. Darla looked back once at Aunt Vivian, standing on the hotel steps with a handkerchief pressed to her eyes. "She'll visit often," Zeke assured her, noting her momentary wistfulness. "Invited her for Christmas already." The journey to their ranch passed quickly, filled with plans and dreams for their future. When they crested the final hill and the cabin came into view, Darla felt a surge of emotion. This was home now, their home. Zeke pulled the buggy to a stop before the porch. "Almost forgot the tradition," he said with a grin, sweeping her into his arms before she could respond. Carrying her easily, he mounted the steps and crossed the threshold into their home. "Welcome home, Mrs. Jameson," he said softly, setting her down in the main room. Darla looked around, noticing the fresh flowers on the table, the new curtains at the windows, the quilts and linens that hadn't been there during her previous visit. "You've been busy," she observed. "Had help," he admitted. "Mrs. Callahan and some of the neighboring women wanted it perfect for you." "It is," she assured him, moving into his embrace. "Absolutely perfect." As the sun began to set, casting golden light through the windows of their home, Darla thought about the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A wagon that lost its horses in the night. A cowboy who said, "Then I'll pull it myself." Sometimes the greatest journeys began with the most unlikely steps. Epilogue: 5 years later, the sound of laughter drew Darla from the garden, where she'd been gathering the last of the summer beans. Shading her eyes against the afternoon sun, she saw Zeke returning from the pasture, their 3-year-old son Ethan perched on his shoulders and their daughter Sarah, barely 2, secured in a sling across his chest. "Mama," Ethan called, waving excitedly. "Papa showed me the new calf, did he now?" Darla set down her basket and moved to meet them. Smiling at the picture they made her tall, strong husband managing their children with the same gentle care he showed to everything he valued. Sarah fell asleep watching the horses, Zeke reported, carefully lowering Ethan to the ground. The boy immediately dashed toward the house, eager to tell his grandmother about his adventure. Aunt Vivian had moved in with them the previous year, claiming the cabin was more comfortable than her boarding house, and the children needed her influence. "Let me take her," Darla offered, reaching for their daughter. As she settled the sleeping child against her shoulder, she felt Zeke's arm encircle her waist. "Happy?" he asked, a question he still posed occasionally as if amazed by his good fortune. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. Their ranch had prospered beyond their earliest hopes. The small herd had grown, the garden expanded into a productive plot that supplied not only their needs but enough to trade with neighbors. Zeke had added 2 rooms to the cabin as their family grew, and a proper barn now stood where the original simple shelter had been. Life wasn't without challenges. A harsh winter 2 years back had claimed some of their stock, and Ethan's birth had been difficult, but they faced each obstacle together, their partnership growing stronger through shared trials and triumphs. As they walked toward the house, where smoke rose invitingly from the chimney and Aunt Vivian could be heard scolding the cat for getting underfoot, Darla marveled at how completely her life had transformed from that terrifying night on the prairie. "What are you thinking about?" Zeke asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About wagons and horses," she replied with a smile, "and stubborn cowboys who don't know when to quit." Understanding lit his eyes. He stopped, turning to face her fully, their sleeping daughter cradled between them. "Best decision I ever made," he said softly, "offering to pull that wagon." "Best decision I ever made was letting you," Darla countered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. As they continued toward the house, toward the family and life they had built together, Darla silently blessed the twist of fate that had brought this man into her life, the horses that had been stolen, the wagon that had needed pulling, and the journey that had led them home.